We're about to be going live.
And I'll do the intro once we're officially live.
That's correct.
Because there's obviously people who are going to be waiting and want to see that intro.
All right, we're live, Matt. So go ahead.
All right, welcome to the 17th meeting of the Junto Club. This is a club inspired by Benjamin Franklin, who, back in the 1700s, organized a group of his friends from a club for mutual improvement. Basically, they came together and discussed topics on business, science, philosophy, politics, and the like to try to kind of, improve themselves, learn more. So, we sort of do the same thing, touching on all those topics or anything that really takes our fancy. And this episode is going to be primarily on Why Nations Fail, a book about why nations fail, self-explanatory title. Just basically trying to understand why some countries become rich and some countries stay in poverty. I'm the one who read the book, so she will be grilling me with questions. But before we do that, Shu, as is tradition, has a quote from Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah, all right. This week's quote is, quote, "If you would have your business done, go. If not, send." End quote. Any thoughts?
Can you read it again?
If you would have your business done, go. If not, send.
So if you...
Does it make sense to you guys? Now, if you want your business done, go. If not, send.
All right. This is a wild guess, but maybe he's basically saying, if you want to get things done, a business deal or something, if you want to actually accomplish it, you need to go so you can, hash it out in person. And if you don't really care about having to actually get through or whatever, then you just send a letter or someone else for you, especially back in, when, technology was much very different. Virtual meetings weren't a thing.
Right. No, maybe? I see that. I see what you're saying, man. And that's, I think that's sort of the direction I was leaning to. If you want something done well, do it yourself, that type of ideology.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I think that's my understanding as well. Have you heard of the agency problem, the principal agent problem? The agency problem, yeah. So basically, any kind of interpersonal relationship, any kind of business relationship, there's always conflict of interest, right? So different people have have their own incentive to do stuff, right? Especially if so that's why for when you're doing things, right, you want to have those incentives aligned, right? If they're not aligned, then things could messed up, right? So, but yeah, so this is I think but I agree with Mike's your interpretation. If you do stuff, if you want to get something done really good, do it yourself, right? If you don't, then send someone else, let someone else do it, But yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that sort of both points you made there go together well, because the idea that people have competing and no two people have the exact same interests probably in any situation. So if you, and when we say do something well, we mean do it to the best meet our interests. So it's the person who can best meet your interests is you. So
yeah, sounds good.
All right. I think we figured that one out. That's good. Last week's was rough. Okay, so news roundtable. Anyone had anything fun they wanted to bring up?
Me? I was going to talk about some pickup lines that I found on the internet.
Oh.
Is that news?
Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to talk about, Mike or Matt?
No, I mean, I feel like the news is mostly depressing.
All right, so let me check. Let's check out this pickup line I found on the internet. "I'm losing my voice from all the screaming your hotness is causing me to do." Any thoughts? Check out this one. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. No, you can get the second one first.
Yeah.
No, I have an A of these. So
All right, like every other pickup line I've ever heard, it's terrible.
Mhm.
So the second one is, I love you. I don't care if you are a doggo or doggo in a trench coat.
I don't know
All
what that
right.
means.
Is that
Now,
just like
no-
the
Like, is
baby
that-
way of saying dog?
I think so, yeah.
So
The
I don't
other
care
one
if
is, you look like a stealth assassin from the clouds.
Are you sure that's a pickup line?
Yeah.
Like,
No,
I guess
no,
that's a different way of saying angel.
yeah. So I'm not sure. Oh, that's pretty good. Yeah. Here's another one. So what's the definition of femtometer? Because I would like to run it through your cork 10 times. Here's another one.
I don't even get it.
Here's another one. Hey, baby, are your schematics compatible with this protocol?
So
What do you think?
that's a
No,
home
these are-
run among
No.
people chained in a basement.
Pickup lines are bad to begin with, and these are below average.
Really? Okay, I was thinking of using it. Actually, so these pickup lines are generated by AI.
Oh, okay. Here's your
Oh, okay. Here's the
gimmick.
angle. Yes.
And they do make sense, right?
No.
So actually, so this is done by a researcher, research scientist, an AI researcher called Janelle Shane. She has a blog called AI Weirdness, and then this is something that she play with. Like she try to using basically a neural network, like deep learning, to generate some pickup lines from. So basically, and then I mean, she commented actually the pickup lines she actually found online generated by humans actually are worse than these. So
Well, she's a computer scientist, so
she was not a computer science actually. She was a physics major. She was doing optics engineering.
equally as bad. All right. But I I didn't do pickup lines, but I obviously use like LSTM, neural networks to generate I tried to generate jokes with like LSTMs, and yeah, they're bad.
So Mike, yeah, I was gonna mention. Do you know have you heard of the GPT-3?
GPT-3? I don't believe so.
Isn't that just the super huge neural net that some researchers made for like general language processing?
Yeah, exactly. It's from Open AI, right? So this is what she used to generate those, right? So you basically have different versions of different models of it, and using that and to basically to do this. Yeah. So yeah. So what it does, I mean, what AI does actually, all it does is just try to predict the next word, right? You generate one word and you try to predict the next word. That's what the AI does basically. And this GPT-3 actually has been very, very powerful right now. So it was able to, like, you basically just give the AI a prompt, and I say, hey, generate the top pickup lines for 2021, and that's what it generated, right? So that's the other thing that the pickup line, the thing it does actually was able to, a lot of people using GPT-3 actually to wrote, like, just give it a prompt, it was able to wrote like computer codes, program that actually works pretty well. And also like write books, poems and stuff like that. Yeah. So
yeah. So is that like, can you actually access like the supercomputer, or like?
No, you have access to the model GPT-3.
Oh, okay. It's just the model. Okay.
Yeah, you can download it. You can play with it. You can retrain it. I think as well. I think it's already pre-trained. You just need to you can play with it. However, I think there's a wait list that you had to wait for your turn to get to play with it. Yeah.
Well, okay, but it's not. I mean, I guess the structure may be set, but like the structure of the model may be set. But what I'm saying is, you can actually like retrain at least parts of it with like different data.
Yeah, I think it's called GTP. It's something called generative. That P stand for pre-train. So it's already pre-trained by all these like wiki, like Wikipedia or everything on the internet already.
Right. Well,
And
no,
then-
that's why those like, because like when I was using GNNs on my personal machine, it was often like without restricting the structure of what was output a lot. Like it was very hard to get stuff that actually worked, like, you know, a result that made any sense whatsoever. But those pickup lines you were just doing, I was like, wow. Like the impressive part of that was not the lines themselves, but like the fact that they sort of made some type of sense and had like pretty good and differing structure, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, but that is because it must like give you access to a computer where you can use like tons of data, like all of Wikipedia, all of, you know, the different online newspapers or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So that's why a lot of people actually turn it into a different program using that to write computer, basically just write a compute. You want to just give a prompt, say I want this program to do, you just like run a code for you basically. So
right, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So and let's talk about AI skepticism a little bit. I think Matt is very skeptic of AI, right? General AI.
Skeptic in the sense that we're not going to have it soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would take that title.
What do you think, Mike?
I soon, like a general AI, as in like actually like good across different domains. Yeah, I agree with Matt. Because I mean, I don't think it's going to be that. I mean, like in our lifetime, we may see stuff. We may see AI do creative things in better ways than we're seeing now. But I don't know that we'll have a robot that could look and act just like me.
I mean, there's always the chance like someone comes up with some crazy idea that works super well, but like we don't have we don't even see the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of making a general artificial intelligence, right? Like a true GAI. Like we just don't know how to do that. We have a lot of really cool AI tools, but they're all very narrow. You know, they work on exactly what you've trained them on generally. And it's very hard to adapt. I mean, there are people who do research on like trying to like, you know, share learning and, you know, adapt things from one domain to another or similar problems, but it's tough.
Yeah. I mean, neural networks, like, I mean, if they're good at like image classification, I wonder, I guess, because I mean, our neurons are far more complex learners than any node in a neural network. So it's like, I feel like that would be a way to ramp up things, like, because it's like if we could figure out how to make like those nodes learn what our neurons are encoding for, then that's a way to ramp up very, very quickly. But
like even if you had a neural network as big as our brain, like they're much simpler. Their neurons are way simpler, and so, and I don't think they are as big as brains yet.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, it's two different issues. It's computing power, like, and like appropriate data, but also our brains are just like better at learning. So
I don't know. I mean, human brains also still have a lot of like different functionality kind of isolated in different parts of the brain that sort of work together. So I mean, I could easily see, you know, the first general artificial intelligence being something similar where you have components, like you have some deep neural networks that do image processing, right? Like maybe that's a part of it. That's part of this artificial visual cortex that does one thing, but then you have entirely different stuff that does other things, right?
Right. No, I think like spatial like localization. I mean, we talked about a couple of weeks ago, like how that's enhancing like chip speed. Like it's essentially just packing things tighter together. So it's like, I mean, the process, like I would imagine that at least the first types of AI, like general AI, would have, essentially algorithms designed independently and then brought together, because in many ways the work, like our brain evolved that way. So.
Yeah. What are you super optimistic, Shu? You think we're gonna see a general AI in 20 years or something?
General AI, I'm not sure, but some pretty good AI, and that's good enough to do a lot of stuff. I'm personally, I don't think AI should be. We don't really need general AI, right? We just need AI and that's good enough to help to augment humans, right? We don't need that AI and that's equivalent of human intelligence. We need it to do something that human can do, right? That's not, I think that's the best way to use it, right?
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Yeah, and then, well, here's a word. I mean, some someone wrote about like skepticism. He wrote about AI. So he is quote, AI programs lack consciousness and self-awareness. They will never be able to have a sense of humor. They will never be able to appreciate art or beauty or love. They will never feel lonely. They will never have empathy for other people, for animals, for the environment. They will never enjoy music or fall in love or cry. What do you think?
He's right about now, but never is a strong statement.
Yeah.
What do you?
So I used to kind of agree with him, because I like when I learned how computers work and programs work, I'm like, how could you ever go from that to, you know, something equivalent to, you know, how humans learn and grow and stuff? It seemed impossible, but I had someone present me kind of a thought experiment, which was like, imagine you just had a super powerful computer, right?
Yeah.
Infinitely powerful. I guess it doesn't need to be infinite, but incredibly powerful. And you just simulated a brain, like a human brain, your human brain, every neuron, every connection, all the molecular interactions within it. And you know, and then you fed it input and took the output out, and you could plug that into a computer or a robot or whatever. Like, if it's a perfect simulation, there's nothing theoretically stopping us from simulating a brain like that, besides just having the information and the processing power. You know, obviously then it could do what a human brain does, even if you call it like a simulation. So now, is that the best way to accomplishment? Probably not, but I think it shows it's possible, right? You can make a brain in software that does the same things a human brain does, at least. And then from the question of, if you say that's not true emotions, but what we have is true emotions, I mean, that's just like a semantics or an impossible philosophical question of, you know, is something that thinks with like a different underlying mechanism, is like their thoughts and feelings fundamentally different somehow? I would say not in any way that matters to us, but.
Right. No, I mean, it's really the question, like the answer is, can AI have like emotion, empathy, all of this? Like, if you say no, like the only way I feel like that's a valid assertion is if you are like humans of souls, you know, like some type of, like, that's the only difference that I could possibly see. Like, if we're designed, like, and you think we're like in some way like presented some divine spark, like, that is literally the only difference I could possibly see. Because AI, like, yes, we can replicate exactly what we have eventually.
All right, that makes sense. So what if I tell you that the thing I just recite to you was generated by AI?
That one was good. That's
That
not
was
like
good,
pickup
yeah.
lines. That sounded like something someone would write for real.
Exactly. Yeah. It was generated by the GTP3 as well.
That's an impressive one.
Yeah, you just gave it, basically, the guy just gave you a prompt, and the prompt for this case is a few words expressing skepticism about AI, and that's what the AI generated.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's
coming.
much better. Yeah, it's coming.
It's coming for your writing jobs, I guess.
That's right.
I mean, I do hate writing, but this is a little late to finish my dissertation for me. So.
Oh, yeah.
That might be the biggest thing you ever write, man.
All right.
It better be. If my next job wants me to write more, I'm gonna be like, F that. I will not do this.
You could just write books. Like, you can be one of those like famous scientists who just like who their career, like, I have expertise in this field, so I'm going to write just books for the layman that are like 200 pages that, you know, just sort of recycle the knowledge in the field.
Maybe. I don't think so.
Okay.
All right.
I feel like enough people are writing books. And you might say, aren't enough people making podcasts too? Absolutely. This is unnecessary, but
this is an excuse for us to talk, and we're putting it out on the internet.
That's right.
That's right. That's right. But we also do your live. Well, not a lot of podcasts doing your live, so, you know.
That's right. If anyone has questions, they're allowed. They can ask us live.
Oh my gosh! Why aren't we on Twitch streaming? That's what we need.
Because I don't know. I don't want to be associated with gamer culture.
Oh my gosh, gamers are the most oppressed group in society.
That's right.
That's obviously a joke, just in case anyone listening couldn't pick up on it.
All right. So get on Twitch, Mike. So anyway, you guys know Elon Musk, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he tweets a lot, right? And he always get in trouble, right? You
Mhm.
remember that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Ooh, what's that?
Oh, no, you can keep talking. This is just for, people who are watching the
I know. I
YouTube
forgot her name.
Atlas. That's a he.
Atlas.
All right, if you're listening, I picked up my cat and started showing it off.
So there's Atlas and Rory, right?
That's right, 2 cats.
Wow. All right.
You can keep talking, Shu.
All right. So Elon Musk, right? We already know he tweet a lot and he always got in trouble, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even with the SEC. So here's the prompt. It's a prompt that you give it to tell the AI GTP3 to write a Dr. Seuss poems about Elon Musk, and this is a part of what he came out with, right?
Okay.
Quote, but then in his haste, he got into a fight. He had some emails that he sent that weren't quite polite. The SEC said, Musk, your tweets are a blight, end quote.
It's pretty good.
That was pretty good.
I might
Pretty good
start
point.
using this. I need to download this just when I want to write something clever on the internet.
No, yeah. I mean, you said, Shu, that it's like a waiting list, right? Because
Yeah.
I feel like something this powerful, like you must just be like signing into like a terminal and putting the data you want to train it with on like a remote machine. And
well, they're not retraining this at all. They're just passing a prompt to an established model, if I understand right.
Yeah, I mean, so it's already pre-trained. I think you just download the model, probably in the source code, right? And you can pre-train it. You can train it with your own stuff again to do something specific that you want, right?
Oh, I see. Okay.
And you can basically modify it to do anything you want specific, to do the pickup lines, right? You need to, you still need to do some work to get it to do exactly what you want, like your application, basically, right?
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's giving you probably a pre-training with like all of the literature on the internet so it already has figured out, like the neural network has already like essentially implicitly has like some understanding of structure between words and stuff like that.
I mean, then all it does is just predict the next word, right? Just predict what the next word should be. That's all the AI does, and he's able to do so much. That's what, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And right now you can, I think, play with it, but I don't think you can do anything commercial with it because Microsoft actually got into a exclusive partnership with them. So I think Microsoft just paid them a bunch of money. Say, okay, I have the only exclusive right to use it for commercial purpose. So, yeah. Anyway, but there's a reason why Microsoft pays so much money for it, right? So,
yeah,
because it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
All right, so it's time for our main topic then.
All right.
Why nations fail.
Okay, so I'll give a quick summary of the book, and then we can get into questions. So the authors basically describe their theory and then go through a bunch of historical examples of how it applies to countries all over the world. And the core idea is the difference between inclusive and extractive institutions. So inclusive political and economic institutions are things that encourage and help people participate, allow people to participate, while extractive institutions are generally some authoritarian figure or something, sort of taking the wealth. So democracy is inclusive because it allows everyone to vote. A free market is inclusive because it, allows anyone to participate. Colonies and slavery are like very extreme examples of extractive institutions, but just authoritarian regimes that have the ability to just seize a business or other stuff can be a milder but still bad form of extractive institutions. So that's the very bold summary. And to give a bit more details, based on this idea, like, so it's trying to set up an understanding beyond like at a higher level than specific policies or laws, right? Like, what's the fundamental concept that makes a nation rich? And the idea is, and some more details. So, like in general, the thing they really point to when it comes to inclusive institutions are things like democracy and the free market, which I already mentioned. Also, a fair and a fair justice system, fair and impartial justice system. Things like schools and investment in roads and stuff. Those maybe stretch the definition a little bit, but obviously schools help more people become educated so they can participate in the economy at a better level. Same with roads. Roads allow more people to participate. So these sort of things help everyone. And if I was to distill the crux of it, of what I got from the book, I don't think they say this anywhere, but to me, what's interesting is, like, in the modern world, countries have built an enormous amount of wealth, and many of them did it really, really quickly. So obviously technology is like a component of this, right? Like, modern technology has enabled us to become wealthier, but that's like a ceiling. And so why did some countries like rapidly grow in wealth and prosperity while others really didn't? I think the key is, like, a country becomes wealthy when the people in it work to create that wealth. Like, fundamentally, that's what has to happen. Like, so many countries have gone from relatively poor to wealthy, and they had to like create the wealth, essentially, right? So what inclusive institutions do is create the environment that people are able to and encouraged to create wealth, usually because it benefits themselves, but in the process they benefit society as a whole. So creating a new business benefits themselves. The idea of investing in a new business to do something more efficiently on a larger scale, that helps them. They make money, but it helps society too, right? Like, that helps provide a gooder service for cheaper, broader, better in some level. So, and when you kind of have this, and it also talks a lot about like cycles, like once you have kind of these inclusive institutions, the things generally tend to sort of spiral up. You see minority groups gaining more rights, more inclusion into the institutions, and those things not just help them, but also help our economy, and vice versa. A lot of extractive institutions, authoritarian regimes, they often like kind of clamp down on anyone who's, doing anything that could threaten their power. So, they sort of continue to perpetuate the problems that leave the countries poor in the first place. All right. So that wasn't fantastic, but that's a quick summary of the core idea as best as I could.
Any questions from you, Mike?
Well, so I guess, I mean, basically the thesis is that nations fail when they have like essentially too many of these systems that exploit and not enough systems that are inclusive.
Yeah, that's a good, decent way to put it.
Okay.
A good example, like a very kind of like on the ground example, is like, you imagine like a farmer who wants to like, invest in it could be a new plow, or it could be a new tractor or something, right? Like something simple, but it allows them to farm more food, make more food, sell more food, get more money. Like, when there's a lot of places, especially in the past, and even some places today, where, if they do that, they get more money. There's a very good chance that either it could be a corrupt government, it could be like organized crime, or it could just be like random crime. People are just going to see that, okay, you now have more wealth beyond just like living in like base poverty. So they just come and take it, right? Like, doing better just makes you a target for people who aren't interested in, building up society as a whole, but are just looking how can they extract wealth from other people. Right. So this is why things like a fair and impartial legal system and the respect of property rights are important, because that incentivizes people to invest in themselves, their businesses, their communities. And it's those things that start to accumulate wealth in society as a whole. So that would be my more physical example of these obviously very kind of vague ideas.
Sure.
So are you saying that, Joe Biden just announced the $2 trillion the infrastructure bill, right?
Yeah.
To improve the roads and bridges, stuff like that. So you think that's an inclusive policy?
Yes. I don't think it's like heavily inclusive, but I think it is a little bit. I mean, it's a good investment. It's not fundamentally, I don't know if it really is changing. I don't know if it's heavily changing how inclusive our country is, but it might be a little bit of a push.
Got you. So what do you think about the Biden's the bill, the infrastructure bill?
I haven't read much about the details, but it seems good. I know. I think he's planning to have our electricity grid carbon neutral by 2035, which would be really awesome. So.
All right. So why doesn't the author using the word inclusive? Like, is there any better word for it? I feel like inclusive is like, it's not. I'm not sure if it hits the nail in the head.
Yeah, I thought about that too at one point because like before I read it, like I kind of heard about the idea and I thought maybe I kind of had like a somewhat different picture of what he meant, but I can't think of a better way to describe it. And after reading it, I was like, okay, it makes sense because it really is about trying to include people in both the political and economic processes and include them as more than just like, a drone, right? Like, slaves aren't included in the economic process of like slavery, right? And that's obviously terrible for them, but arguably it also holds back the areas that relied on slaves, from becoming more productive. Like now we know there's much better, ways you can utilize human capital, but
yeah, we just became slaves to corporations, basically.
I mean, this is a bit of a tangent, but some socialist leaning people would claim socialism's more inclusive than capitalism, but that's a hairier debate.
I see.
Let's set that aside for the moment.
All right. So you mentioned authoritarian countries. Of course, people are going to think about China, right? So what does it? Is China a counterexample to the book's thesis then?
So it's an interesting example for sure. And I think the book talks about China, and to a degree, we kind of have to wait and see. So I think according to the book's theories, China can't sustain, like if its theory is correct, China can't sustain its growth. Because the theory says that extractive countries can generate some limited growth. Because like obviously, setting up a colony and stealing their resources is going to get you some wealth. But it's arguing that that's not sustainable and will never it will never generate as much wealth as an inclusive thing. So it would argue, as I understand the theory, that China will either become inclusive, as more people gain more money, they might, push for more rights and kind of start, a cycle where it becomes a more inclusive liberal country, or it's likely will eventually kind of have a collapse and, either a collapse or just like a stunting where it never reaches the wealth of, both Western and Eastern countries that are, fully developed, like, like lots of European places or South Korea or things like that. But I would like to mention that, a big part of China's success was clearly it shifting to a more inclusive capitalistic approach, right? Mao died. Then they started all sorts of market reforms, and they set it up things like the special economic zones, where encouraging businesses to invest. And that was exactly when we saw a big shift in China going from very poor for decades to rapid growth and development. Now it has. This is more about like some people are like China's still. It's kind of like a weird half and half, right? Like they say they're socialist, but they also have a billionaire class, right? China has the second most billionaires of any country in the world. So, it's a very interesting case, but I think I would say their history shows that the shift they did towards more inclusive institutions aligned very clearly with the rapid progress they got in the 80s and 90s. Where it goes from here, it's hard to say.
As someone growing up in China, so there's a phrase that so after Mao died, I think Deng Xiaoping, he's the one that took over, and then he actually in China actually people call him the engineer, right? The engineer of like the new era or something for China, right? He basically built China into the new, modern, right? So what he did, there's a phrase called socialism, like capitalize, or or communism privatize or something like that, right? So he's doing both, right? So it does try to encourage nice free markets in there, right? So things still are owned by the country, by the government, but still encourage a lot of people to do private stuff, right? So that's what happened do. So China is not really a pure socialism. So it's more like socialism capitalized. So it has capitalism as well. So yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting mix and of socialism and capitalism ideas of inclusive and extractive institutions. So we'll see. Obviously they're trying to mix it in a way that makes things better. I'm of the opinion that if they just sort of more fully adopted, these inclusive institutions, sort of leaned into the free market economy and things like that more, they probably would have had more growth and would continue growing faster. But we'll live long enough to see what happens with China. So this question will be answered for us.
Yeah.
I was hoping we live long enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Barring something tragic, we should. I imagine in the next 20, 30 years, China will do something pretty interesting.
Yes, stay tuned for the upcoming episode where we're going to talk about longevity and anti-aging. No, not longevity, life extension.
All right. So, any other questions besides China?
Yeah, of course. So I guess why I want to go back a little bit. Like, why did you pick on a book?
There's a subreddit on Reddit called Neoliberal, and they push it a lot as they jokingly refer to it as their Bible. But it was just basically pushed online as a good book to read and understand. And so I read it.
So are you part of the neoliberal?
I go on the subreddit sometimes and read stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean they're really just liberals. But
are you part of the group? Do you believe that I don't know whatever they believe? What's neoliberal anyways? I mean neoliberal? What does neoliberal mean?
So the neoliberal is possibly one of the most abused political titles in modern time. People on both sides refer to people on the other side as neoliberals as an insult. So it's kind of the subreddit kind of took the name as a joke, but functionally what they advocate for is generally liberal ideology. I mean, liberal is a broad thing, but they're really kind of moderate Democrats in the U.S. kind of political spectrum.
So,
okay.
All right,
Mike.
Well, no, okay, I'll go ahead, Matt, if you stole something on that.
I was going to say, and that aligns reasonably well with people who are often called neoliberals in modern day, which is, people call Obama and Clinton and Biden even neoliberals, right? At least online they do. So, it kind of aligns. They're people who also largely agree with the things they do. So yeah, but this is a side topic. That's not important.
Right.
No, that's an interesting topic, actually.
Okay. Before we get too far away from the thesis of the book. So we talked about, I guess, is it advocating? So, I guess I phrased the thesis sort of just making an assumption that it's more about inclusivity, good, exclusivity, or, sort of oppressive, exclusionary type practices bad. But is there anything in the book that would hint at there needs to be some, not necessarily 50-50 balance, but 100% inclusion is bad, or is it just advocating for 100% inclusion?
I mean, I think it would mostly just advocating for 100% inclusion. I mean, you could potentially interpret what's the difference between a government taxing a little bit to invest intelligently and a government, just seizing too many funds to abuse, right? To some degree, right. It's both a government, taking people's money, but the amount and what they use it for, what matters. So there's definitely some lines where it's not necessarily what's inclusive versus extractive is not necessarily clear cut. Probably the most important difference is, how it was used, but you can also use stuff that benefits one, it might not benefit the politician as directly as it benefits one community over the other. So I don't know. I guess it would push for inclusivity, but it does, advocate for things at schools and roads and stuff, right? It considers those good things, which does involve taking some people's property / money.
Sure.
It's it's not like full libertarian, taxes are theft.
Right. And even beyond, like, I'm thinking not only of like sort of the economic sort of process involvement of everyone, but I mean, obviously a big news story in Georgia now is voting laws, or like a big topic right now is voting laws. So, it's like, I guess there are questions about like, is 100% voter participation what we want, or is it, and it's like, I mean, for the most part, I think it's good people vote, but I guess depending on what your society looks like, I mean, I guess that, like, if you lived in a place where, I mean, I don't know, people like there was larger groups more like actively like against something that was like obviously, I mean, I don't like it's a difficult thing, right? Because I mean, I guess like 100% inclusivity is like making the assumption that you're never going to encounter essentially never going to encounter something that sort of the majority opinion can't like get right enough to keep things going.
No, that's true. I mean, so what I would say is broad democracy is robust. It's not necessarily always going to be right or the most efficient, but like, sure, you can hypothetically say, well, what if the majority gets it wrong? Like, couldn't we have like a small, super smart elite, make the right call for everyone?
Sure.
Problem is like, that's very fragile in that, like,
they could
if they
get something wrong.
Like, if they're not correct, it can go wrong. And it also can very quickly incentivize the wrong things where, incentivize them making decisions that benefit themselves at the overall harm of the society at large. So, having a broad democracy encourages, the politicians and leaders to appeal to everyone, the broadest, possible range, make decisions and choices that appeal broadly to the people of, their country or state or whatever. So I think it pushes people in the right direction. It certainly doesn't mean it's always going to be, people are going to vote for the right thing, but.
Sure. Well, I mean, when people feel involved, like, and it's, as you say, sort of the broad democracy, it's sort of like, I mean, it incentivizes them to like everyone to make decisions that are good, or not necessarily the best, but like decent enough for everyone. So,
so
I mean,
Mike, are you for the new law in Georgia? The voting law?
I don't know whether it's for or against it. I mean, I just know it's big news. Is this the one saying that you can't like serve people water in line or something?
Something like that, but I think it's mostly like require you to have ID. That's the more important thing. Require to have ID to vote.
But Georgia already requires you have ID to vote.
I'm not sure. Then, when I went to, I'm not sure if I've shown my ID. I don't remember.
I voted in Georgia, and it definitely was like you need to have your ID. It's very clear.
So I don't know. Maybe some place that you don't need ID maybe it was not a requirement before. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, I think people should be able to have water and food in line if they're going to pass out, but I'm not necessarily totally against needing ID.
Yeah, I feel like the ID thing might be like a straw man of sort of thrown out as like a fake thing where they're like, oh, you're against ID, but it's like, but ID was already required. So this bill is not just saying you need ID, which is I mean, some people contest it, but doesn't seem unreasonable, right? To like prove who you are if you're going to vote. But I think so. I haven't read too much about it either, but I'm assuming there's stuff that's worse than just needing an ID, because otherwise they.
Yeah. All right. Maybe
say that, but like the Georgia Secretary of State website was pretty explicit about like you need an ID to vote.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do deep dive next time.
That could be.
Yeah.
Moving on to the side topic, another side topic. So you mentioned that the Why Nations Fail, the book, is the Bible for neoliberalism.
That's right.
Why? Why do they?
Well, I think broadly speaking, it advocates for, a liberal view of the world, kind of, pro-capitalism, pro-democracy, pro-human rights, that sort of thing.
But I mean, and that's conservative believe in that too, right?
Sometimes.
What do you mean? Conservative doesn't believe in democracy and capitalism?
I mean, capitalism, they usually say they believe in, but sometimes they do things. Well, to be fair, both sides do this where they're like against it, right? Everyone's like, we're for capitalism until a business does something they don't like, and then they're like, oh wait, this is a problem. You know,
Uh,
they moved, someone moved a company to Mexico. We need to shut down free trade and force companies to like stay in the US or something, right? Like seize them because it's wrong for them to, you know, trade with other countries or something. I don't know. This is
okay.
rambling. This
Okay,
um
okay.
what are
Last,
you asking me again? Sorry.
I was wondering why is the bad Bible for the neoliberalism?
I mean, I think it's just it's a well-written book. It has a lot of a lot of historical examples.
Mm,
And I think it just explains I think it explains the world well. Like it's a theory
mm,
that clearly aligns with what we've seen in history well. So there's alternative theories, right, to why nations are rich or poor. Maybe we should
yeah,
talk
yeah,
about
yeah.
that. So
Well,
one is environmental determinism, right? That one was popular in the past, and there's been some small resurgences where it's all about where a country was and its climate and what animals are around. Guns, Germ, and Steel is a popular book that advocates it.
mhm,
And they actually discuss this and why nations fail. And and I agree with it. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. For a long time, it's basically the thesis of the idea is usually that like, oh, the temperate climate countries are where most of the countries are rich. So it has something to do with that is why they're rich. But Australia is very tropical, super hot, right? But
mhm,
it's became very quickly developed into like a modern rich country, when lots of other tropical countries didn't. Well, why? Because they inherited the same institutions from the UK, from Britain, that created this, sort of same inclusive institutions that created this wealth, led to this, path of generating wealth for a society. And
mm,
vice versa, there's Eastern European countries that are very temperate, cold, very similar climate to Germany, but they're poor. They're very
mm.
poor, even though Germany, not that far to the west, is very wealthy. So I think environmental determinism, obviously, I'm not an expert on it. There's probably people who would get mad at this, some professor somewhere, but it doesn't seem to explain the world well.
Mm. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. What are the other alternatives
Well, there's
theories?
one other I see sometimes online. I don't know if this one's as much of an academic theory as a conspiracy or at least an idea online, but some people will say, oh, the reason Western countries are rich is imperialism, right? So they'll be like, oh, it's just a legacy of colonialism, even though, sure, they don't have colonies now, but that's how they got rich. And now that they get to like stay rich because they have the advantage. And then they'll be like, and in the US, which didn't really have colonies, but they're like, oh, but slavery. So the US had a lot of slaves, and that's why the US is rich. This also fails. There's some it maybe does a little bit better job than environmental determinism in terms of just lining up, but it also fails because, like, for instance, Brazil, a huge country with many natural resources, just like the U.S., actually had more slaves come into it from the Atlantic slave trade than the U.S. Did not become super wealthy, right?
Mm.
Australia was a colony, did not have colonies. Why did South Korea become super rich when North Korea became broke poor? South Korea, after the Korean War, did not go set up colonies in other countries, nor did they import slaves to do work. They became super rich. Or even comparing the US South and North, right? The US South had a big slavery, right? That's a major industry. The US South is also still more poor than the North. And at the end of the Civil War, or even before the Civil War, the difference was more stark. Like largely the US South has caught up over time. Obviously, we're vastly more richer, the U.S. South, than it was in like 1870. But the slavery was not. It's like it's kind of like a short-term thing. It's like short-term thinking, right? The extractive institution of slavery on the short term can make some people wealthier, but the North, which was building factories and industrializing, going to a more inclusive approach to economic growth, came out way ahead. And that difference still kind of lingers to some degree.
Well, part of that though is like, is part of that sort of the North being, I guess, closer, like more connected to like, England, where the Industrial Revolution started, or?
I mean, it could be, but I feel like, I don't know. Like the Industrial Revolution was already underway before like the U.S., became a country, and colonists settled from the Britain and all the states, as far as I'm aware, or most of them.
Sure.
So I don't think I doubt that it would have been I doubt there would have been a huge difference between the North and South in terms of that. I just think it's, I think the South sort of got trapped in a cycle of using an extractive institution to make wealth, which limited it, right?
Sure.
So, and then shifting from that became difficult, and it took a while, and it kind of let it back. So anyway, so those are a bunch of random examples of why this idea that, the Western countries plus some other countries in the East are rich was from imperialism. It doesn't really align well with history or, what we know.
Yeah. That's pretty good. From a quick summary of the book, I just look at some of the summary of, they mentioned like Botswana, like what happened in Botswana? Why is that an example that they study? Do you know?
Yeah. So this was so they talk about the unique kind of culture and politics in Botswana and how like that they're more inclusive, and that's why Botswana is doing much better than the neighboring African countries. I honestly don't remember all the details. This is really in the heart of going through a ton of historical examples, and I read this a while back. So I don't remember enough of the details to talk about it much. I remember the core thesis, but you'd have to read the book if you want to learn more about Botswana.
Oh, gotcha. So I guess so how is American doing right now in terms of inclusiveness? Like, are we going downhill, or are we going uphill, or are we just stay neutral?
I would say it's mostly staying neutral. I mean, but should we be progressing? Could we still be progressing? Probably. But I don't think anything has backslid too much in terms of, but I'm not sure what's the key answer to making the economy more inclusive. Obviously, UBI gives everyone that baseline start to make things, to help everyone get involved, but, not to go back on a topic, but I think we've been relatively neutral, right? Like, I don't think our fundamental institutions have changed heavily since, I mean, we had the civil rights and, women's suffrage and things like inclusion of minority and women more into the economy made us better. And there's still some work we could do towards that, but.
Do you see any policies in U.S. policy right now, like American government, any policies that are examples of inclusive, and maybe, and the other one, I guess the policies that are good for inclusion, and the other one example, maybe some policies that are bad for inclusiveness. Do you see some examples of those?
So I think one good example would be immigration and amnesty, right? So basically you already have a bunch of illegal immigrants in the country, right? It would be very easy to argue that giving them amnesty, a path to either citizenship or at least some legal status, would help include them in both the economy more fully, as more like as not hiding in the dark, but like full legal residents, at least, if not citizens. And that would likely both help them economically, make their own lives better, and also grow the economy itself.
But isn't that policy the cause of the current border crisis?
Is there a current border crisis? I saw some things about it. Then I saw other things being like, what crisis? I mean, there's immigrants. I'm not even sure has there even been like a big surge or anything? I've heard conflicting reports of whether there's like more than normal.
Well, at least I know the Republican side is always a crisis, right? Like Fox News and Ted Cruz, visiting the border, so it's a crisis, But I guess the Democrats just, it's not a crisis. So yeah. What about you, Mike? What are your thoughts?
I mean, about the border. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know.
You haven't paid attention to the border?
No, I
Oh,
think
okay.
it's political, partisan bullshit like always. So, I mean, when Trump was in, oh, people are separating their kids. Yeah, that's horrible. It's still going on. The Democrats are like, no, it isn't. The Republicans are like, oh, isn't it horrible? So, I mean, if it's happening, it's bad. But like I say, it's dependent on who's president, who you're listening to.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So good. So I think to make it inclusive, just in one. So what on the counter? Like, do you see any policy that is bad for inclusiveness currently?
Not letting voters get water
In
in
line,
voting
yeah, so-
lines.
Yeah, that's well, that's how I brought it up, because I was like, that's a very clear, like, new thing. That's like, okay, that's exclusion in the political process.
Or really, I mean, there are definitely some attempts to sort of make voting harder in some areas. You can debate maybe what policies are valid or not, but clearly some people want to make voting harder, right? That's very clearly not inclusive.
What about tax? Like taxing the rich, right? That's what Biden's proposing to do right now. So is that an inclusive policy or not inclusive?
Is he?
Yeah.
Did he do that? When did he say that? I'm gonna
I think
send
recently
him an angry email.
I think that's his next step. I think that's something that he want to do. Like just,
okay, what is he defining as rich? That's all.
Wait, are we taxing wealth or the wealthy? Because those are different things.
Exactly.
I'm not sure. I think the wealthy, but at least, at least one thing I know for certain is okay. Then let's put that aside, right? That's one thing for certain. The way he paid for the $2 trillion infrastructure bill is basically getting more tax from the corporations, right? Mm-hmm. So do you think that is the good way to do it, inclusive policy, like taxing the corporations?
I think it's inclusive enough. I don't know if this like that specific policy detail you can really like put it into the framework of inclusive or extractive.
Okay.
Which are really supposed to be labels for institutions, not specific policies or laws, but it doesn't seem to violate it. Okay. The inherent like thought pattern, you know.
Okay, let's go to the hypothetical policy. If taxing the rich, right? So is that inclusive or not inclusive?
Taxing the rich, I mean, they should be taxed like everyone. You should tax everyone, which includes the rich. So I'm going to call it inclusive, unless it's. But you'd have to give me more details on
they're probably going to
tax policy.
Them more, right?
Yes.
Like
again, I don't think specific tax policy like this is going to be like. This is not a good way to think about this concept.
Okay. All right. I do have a question. You were talking about taxing the wealthy on the wealth. What's the difference?
So taxing wealthy people, like putting taxes on rich businesses and individuals, is obviously a good thing to do. You need tax money. If anyone's going to pay the most, it should be the wealthiest people. Taxing wealth is a bad idea because it's just an ineffective policy. And Andrew Yang would made this point, like a bunch of countries implemented a wealth tax in Europe, and almost all of them got rid of it. So why? Because it's very difficult to implement, and they raised very little money overall because they spent so much effort trying to tax it, and they didn't get that much back. It's just wealth is a weird concept, right? Like, I mean, it's kind of arbitrary. So, you know, if someone buys a painting, like how much is that worth? You know, do you have to go have art experts evaluate every painting in some rich person's house to try to determine their wealth? Do they have to evaluate every, you know, car and boat? Like there's a lot of stuff, and those might not be too hard. There's some stuff that's not too bad to evaluate, but there's a lot of stuff that would be really hard. And it makes it, you know how rich people already get around taxes, right? They do anything they can. A wealth tax is probably the most gameable tax possible, right? Like it would be very easy for them to put money into things and then just somehow get someone to say it's not worth that much. And then later on, they can sell it again for way more than they paid taxes on it. And this is what happened. And it's just very difficult to implement and deal with. It's just not effective.
I see. So just
the core idea that some people with massive amounts of wealth, should be the main people, like should pay more in taxes, is not bad. It's just on an implementation level, it's flawed, and we have many historical examples showing why it's bad.
Because
Okay.
wealth isn't liquid. Or
Wealth is not liquid. It's not concrete or objective. It's
Okay.
It's just like the hardest thing to tax. What you should tax is consumption.
Okay. That's good. I mean, that kind of makes sense to me. Yeah, just taxing the income, right, and the consumption as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, consumption is kind of on the flip side. It's the easiest thing to tax and track. Isn't doing that on your own is regressive, but if you're using the taxes to help people who are poor, you fix that anyway. So, but
okay. All right. So going back to the book, so is there anything that you disagree with the book when you were going through it? Disagree with the author?
And the core idea, no. There was one example they used of a town that was like had the border cut between it, kind of the border of Mexico and the US.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And they talked about like the differences into the town and how it's like just on an institutional level. And honestly, I didn't think the example really worked because I feel like there's a lot more to it than just like different institutions between those two towns. Also, like the town in, the US side is one of the poorer towns in the US, and the town on the Mexico side is one of the wealthier towns in Mexico, but the US town is still richer than the Mexican side. But I'm like, it was one of many examples. So I'm not, and it wasn't like ended up being a counterexample, but it was just a weird one where I'm like, I feel like there's actually, for this case, there's a lot of like clear alternative hypotheses that could apply. Too many confounding factors, but
yeah, it's because the way they define fail, right? Well, how they define failure anyway? Is it because just they define it just like the GDP, like how much money you produce?
I mean, yeah, I think GDP is one of. I think they looked more general, just how wealthy a country or a society is, which isn't always. I mean, they use historical examples from before GDP was even a thing, right? Too, right? Rome and stuff like that. So, but like I mean, for every society, there's been at least some, there's at least some written documentation about how rich people were, how rich the government was, rich people, poor people, like what was the level people were living at. So you can make guesses, at least reasonable estimates.
Okay. Yeah, just curious if there's a country that is like, it's not really wealthy, but might consider poor, but the people live very stable life, and they are consider doing very well, stable, peace, like being productive, happy, so those, I mean, based on this book, you consider failure, right? Because it's not very wealthy. Yeah,
maybe that's true. If you have a good example of that, that'd be interesting to bring up.
Yeah, I guess those people like living in the woods, they don't really mingle with the modern society. Those people, I guess.
I guess I don't think I'm maybe for modern times, but like, I mean, you go back a couple hundred years and being poor wasn't like, oh, I can't have the newest tech and go out to eat every, day. Being poor was like, I don't know if I'll make it through the winter or I'll starve to death, right? Like, it's not that far back in time when 50% of children died before adulthood, right? And that was just normal all over the world. So, yeah, so the idea of like, oh, maybe they're not rich, but they're doing well enough. In today's world, that could possibly be true. You could have a country that's on the poorer side, but everyone's fed, everyone gets basic healthcare and housing. And you're like, hey, that's not so bad. That's maybe even good in some people's mind. That they could argue. I think some people would find that better than what we have in the US, where there's more disparities and maybe the average person's better off, but there's, the rich, super rich and more poor people. But yeah, in terms of history, I would be very surprised if you found an example of that.
Okay, all right. And so I want to go to India, actually. Just, I don't know, somehow you thought about India because, these are three almost like very like China, right? India is very popular, but a lot of people say it's going to be the next, superpower as well. So, I mean, what's happening in India though? does the book give you any perspective on India?
The book doesn't. I don't think it really talks about India much because I think a lot of the stuff that's happening is too new. So there's not enough. It's not history enough to really like evaluate. Yeah, and I don't know too much. I mean, from what I've heard, India is pushing. You could say India is pushing towards more inclusive things, but that's a lot. I don't know too much about it. If you have more concrete examples of like the changes India has been making, we could discuss that.
Oh, I just wondering why India is not in the same level as China right now, right? So then that's why I want to just wondering why it's not as wealthy, or maybe as as it's not recognized as a equivalent as China. So then that's why I'm asking. Yeah.
Well, it's not as wealthy as China, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's got a similar population, and it's growing, it's developing. Like it could end up as wealthy as China, and not so long, but right now at least it's behind.
Yeah. So that's why I'm just curious, like why is that the case, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
We've talked about. Sorry, I've just been thinking about like in previous like weeks. We've talked about sort of the like I guess conflict, and so I mean in the literature, like it's basically you find that like when making a decision, you want like a moderate amount of like topic-based, task-based conflict and very low emotional conflict in order to get like a somewhat optimal decision. Because like, and put another way in like previous weeks, we've talked about like how if you have too many options, it can paralyze you. And like, or like, and if you have too many options, or if you have like high task-based conflict in like a group or something, it can lead to emotional conflict. So I guess like I'm trying to think about how to apply like this book to like our country in a way, and like also the books and also I'm thinking like the book's thesis, like I mean 100% inclusivity, like on all things, like on all fronts, like I think I mean it's just hard for me to be like it sounds good in theory, but I'm wondering if in practice is that going to lead to something like, where we have too many options, too many opinions, and that ultimately leads to the emotional, like, what we're seeing like emotionally right now, right? Where essentially there's just like emotional outcry everywhere.
Is this like the Bernie Sanders, we don't need 20 types of deodorant?
Maybe.
I think he said something like that one day, like we don't need 20 types of deodorant in the store, Right. I don't know. This kind of sounds like a reach, Mike. I'm going to be honest.
Well, I don't, because I think you are thinking about the opposite of inclusive. I don't think the opposite of inclusive is not exclusive, right? Even if you are excluded, it doesn't mean that that's the wrong thing to do, right? As long as you are not doing the opposite of inclusive, and is from this perspective is extractive, right? Are you exploiting these people, right? You try to extract stuff from it. Maybe there's a different way. Maybe you are thinking, okay, if it's not 100%, so 20% excluded, then maybe that's bad. But I think the opposite of inclusive is extractive, right? So it's not
right. Exactly.
exclusive.
Okay. Yeah. So it's not inclusive exclusive. It's inclusive extractive. That's right.
Yeah. Different policy. Maybe that helps. I don't know.
No. I had forgotten that distinction, so it does. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not slavery, right? You are making that citizen not as productive because is not. You are only using their labor. Now you're not leveraging his brain to do maybe not. If you don't do slavery, these people are gonna actually do a lot of like invent stuff, right? That might be changing the world and stuff like that. So.
Right. Obviously, slaves have a very little incentive to work hard and effectively for very good reason. Beyond the terrible, just moral crime that slavery is. But yeah, no, that's a really good point she made. It's so like, I mean, in a very simple level, you can think of inclusive as kind of cooperative, while extractive is competitive in the sense of like, not competitive like in a market sense, but competitive in the sense of like, I'm going to take from you.
Right.
Get wealth rather than make anything.
Right. No, I mean, that makes sense. So not
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. I had 3 more questions. One is so did the book change how you think and all? Like before you read a book, like if you compare like before you read a book and after, like did it change your thinking any way?
Yeah, I don't know if I thought much about like kind of institutions as a concept as much, because I feel like in politics it's very easy to think about policies, laws, and very like kind of more fine grained, things. And also kind of just assume technology is like why we're wealthy, right? And obviously, again, it's a part of it. But I think it kind of helped. Yeah, it kind of helped me view kind of history and the world through a different lens and say, okay, why do some countries, in some cases, the same people that are split into two countries, why did, one go one way, one the other? It's not just one picked better policies, but like there's a more fundamental underlying, cause.
Yeah, I think as you summarize it in the beginning, is that it's about kind of about all about the people, right? If you need to leverage the people to be more productive individually. Yeah.
And so they need to be like incentivized and enabled to be productive. And if you have everyone being productive, like it's very clear in the modern economy, if you have everyone being highly productive, you're going to become really rich, right? That's all the rich developed countries, the regular income of a worker is much higher. They're just more productive for a variety of reasons. Tend to be more educated, tend to be able to use technology more, better tools and stuff, et cetera, et cetera.
So is there any way you can apply this concept from the book to business, like companies, corporations? Because I think you're talking about institution, right? Institution, companies, that's kind of, smaller example, but can you apply this to these institutions?
I think you could. I mean, I'm doing this off the fly, but I think kind of employee-friendly policies, like things like giving employees stake in a company, stocks, maybe rewarding them for doing well, and just, that sort of thing, kind of getting them kind of like, rather than just having a very dictatorial, like the managers makes you do this and you just get your pay no matter what, and like I'll punish you if you don't do the stuff, like kind of encouraging employees to be active, to think on their own, to take initiative, and to be rewarded for the success of the company over it all. I think you could argue that's kind of a similar inclusive framework, right? And and maybe that would make your company better because you'd have employees kind of, engaged and trying to do more rather than just grinding. I mean, there's always going to be some people who just want to grind for their money, right? And they're not really that concerned about the company, but that's how you could maybe apply these ideas.
Okay.
And I mean, I've heard stuff about that, right? Where people are like, say like, if you basically give employees more power in decision making, then things often go well because they're the ones who really know what's going on the ground level. They're the But
yeah, this is a similar concept in the military called decentralized decision making, right? You have a commander, right? Send you, give you some missions, but these are people, the soldier are the one executing it, right? And their decision need to be decentralized, right? Cannot just be like someone on top just like shout out commands, right? They need to do it themselves on the ground. Yeah,
I think it's not like inclusive versus extractive isn't explicitly decentralized or centralized, but there's clearly like some correlation between the two, right? The more you include, that's just obviously more people in general. Inherently, things will become more decentralized, and extractive institutions tend to be concentrated in terms of someone or some group with power doing the extracting from other groups. So you tend to get this more strict hierarchical power structure.
Maybe in a way, I'm thinking like instead of just thinking about what can I get from my employees, right? They need to do this so I can benefit, right? Maybe it's like giving back to the employers as well. Like, what can I do to give benefit the employees, right? So instead of just not just taking, right? Yeah.
I think Chick-fil-A is a great example of this, right? Those employees are so much better than every other fast food. I have to assume they get paid way better.
Oh, really? How so? Why Chick-fil-A?
Have you ever been to Chick-fil-A?
Yeah,
It's
a few times with Mike. Because he's obsessed with it.
it's crazy because
I
like
enjoy
they're so
Pickle.
efficient. Like there'll be like a long ass line in Chick-fil-A, but it'll keep going at a really steady pace. And when you like pull up to the car, they have like one person waiting for your credit card and then like another person already handing you the food. They're like both sticking themselves out the window. Or when it gets busy, they'll have people walk outside with a terminal to like, get your orders faster while you're in line. And they're just super friendly and nice and like
Ah.
and so much better. Like the level of like employees at Chick-fil-A is so much better than your normal fast food. I assume they must be doing something like this.
Oh, you mean the customer service and everything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's obviously it's both customer service and like they're friendly and polite and
Mm.
engaged and enthusiastic when you talk to them, but they're also like really fast and efficient. Like they are working well. They're not just like a lot of fast food places, the people are just kind of like
Yeah.
going along. And it's like, okay, I get it. They're being paid garbage, so they don't really care. It's like, I understand this, that's just how most fast food places are, but not Chick-fil-A.
Maybe it's because they believe in God.
I don't think every Chick-fil-A employee believes in God, but we could see if that, factors into their business organization.
Okay. Interesting.
But yeah.
Cool. I think that's pretty good. And that's all my questions for this week for the book. Yeah, I think that's give me a lot of pretty good understanding.
To summarize again,
Yep.
I think the basic idea is really intuitive when you think about it. But like, if you want a country to be rich, yeah, you're going to need people to work effectively to create that wealth.
Hmm.
And if you're and that seems kind of obvious when you say it, right? And if you go from there, it kind of leads to this idea pretty well.
What's the most surprising thing you learned from the book?
It's a shame I read this like a year and a half ago because it's hard to remember now. What most surprised me at the time? Or any examples of anything that was super surprising? I don't know. Okay. I can't remember what I did and did not know at that time.
Did they talk about Singapore and all, like Singapore and all? You don't. That means no.
Probably, maybe.
Or Taiwan.
Korea was a big one. It talked about Korea a lot, so that's one of the Asian tigers, right? And it also talked about Japan a little bit, which sort of went through their process of like transforming to an inclusive society earlier than most of these other East Asian countries. But I don't know if Singapore was mentioned as much.
Okay.
It mostly tried to focus on things, I would say, kind of like pre-1980s, because it is trying to take a historical look, right? Things that are too modern, it's hard. China was like kind of the big exception and still the open question, right? They're like, okay, this is what China's done, but it's still kind of unknown how a lot of the things in China are going to work out. But it was more of a historical book than like a what's going on right now in the world book, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sounds good. Yeah, most countries already being pretty, like Japan is already established by the 80s, right? And then China was still struggling in the 80s. And then in the 90s was still struggling too, right? But only around 2000, like 20 years ago, it started to become really much better. Yeah.
Well, I think it started growing a lot in the 90s too.
Yeah.
But, that probably wasn't spread all over. I mean, I think a lot of that growth is concentrated in the special economic zones in China anyway, even now.
I did not feel the growth when I was in in the 90s.
I mean, it could definitely make sense that like some areas would have, it's not going to instantly change everything in the whole country, right? It's like starts in some areas and spreads out to some degree.
Yeah.
But no, it's a good book. It's honestly can get a little boring in the middle part when you're just getting to like the 12th country where they're like going through how it like aligns with their theory. Yeah. But if it's too boring, you can just skip a few chapters. The beginning and the end are real good.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, cool. I guess just another point going back to China a little bit. Like in growing out in the 90s, those like Japanese schools, like you like in the US too. Like in middle school, you have these basketball teams, right? You can join the sports teams, right? Clubs and stuff like that, right? When I was in middle school, I actually playing a lot of basketball with my friends, right? And then I want to like to have a team. I wish now we have a team like that, but our school just did not have anything like that. It's like no extracurricular activities, no like after school clubs and stuff like that. And at that time I was reading like like Japanese anime mangas, right? Anime like books, and then they talk about these like basketball clubs, martial art clubs, and then baseball clubs. I was like, what the fuck? I wish we have that, but I think right now trying to have it, but just when I was growing up, just there's nothing like that. I was like, yeah, bro, in the wrong time.
You're just one generation too early. Usually people are like, I was born a generation too late.
No, I think I was just 10 years too early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm 100 years too early because I want to be in that we've cured death age, which we're gonna miss.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for further topics. Oh well.
Yeah. No.
All right. Any final thoughts from Mike?
Yeah, no. I mean, I just keep like, as always. I mean, I am like go back and forth. I mean, like it makes sense to me that like I'm thinking about inclusivity versus exclusivity, and not like having remembered inclusivity versus like sort of exploitation, and like. I mean, if we treat those as like one-dimensional spectrums each, I mean, like it makes sense that like leaning towards inclusivity on both those spectrums is like sort of obvious, but I'm not 100% convinced on either spectrum that 100% one way or the other is good. But so just because like when you brought up businesses, I was thinking I mean. Because sort of 100% inclusivity in a business, sort of like as Matt was getting at, like is probably more going to be like going down the route of like everyone having equal shares, right? Like everyone being as invested as they can be, or as like included as they can be. But
yeah, go ahead.
Well, but I would just say that like I agree that everyone should feel that they have a stake in it, but like there's a question about like with respect to the. And this, I going back to the quote we started the episode with, like no one knows your wants or like your as well as you do. So if you start a business with a certain vision, like I think there needs to be some degree, like there may be some degree of exploitation, some degree of exclusivity that is necessary for you to drive that where you want it to drive. With the respect of a country, obviously, that's a whole nother thing. But
yeah, and I mean, you're not wrong there, but yeah, I get the important thing is countries and a company or a business is not the same thing, right?
Right.
So, countries are not created by someone for a certain purpose. So the idea that, a business, you might say, oh yeah, the owner should be able to sort of drive towards what they're going for. But with a country, shouldn't have just one person deciding, what happens to everyone. Because this is in the end, and this is a theory for nations, right? And the institutions that, are part of those nations. It's not like presented as a general life philosophy, how to be happier and get rich or something.
Yeah, but I think, Mike, your point of inclusive, I feel like inclusive doesn't mean everybody have equal power, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that, right? It just means, I think, and it's from what I understand, what Matt was talking about was inclusive just means that you try to enable everybody to be productive, right? But doesn't mean you should give them everybody equal power, right? To make a decision, right? So
no, that's good. I think she made a good point. I think you could argue, the employee, who doesn't have any power, but they get a decent pay to do a job that they're assigned. Yeah. Like this is an inclusive, that it could be to some degree is inclusive because you're including them in the whole process. They are getting paid for it. They have the choice to, work or not work. And I don't know, what's the example of an extractive thing? Those scummy companies that like, you pay them to get like part of into the weird sales pyramid scheme thing.
Yeah, the pyramid
scheme. Like that could be like an extractive company, right? Because they're in a very literal sense, they're looking at their employees as the way they get most of their money. It's from the employees, and then it's hoping to build. So I would say a pyramid scheme is an extractive business.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. I mean, it's interesting, but yeah, I guess I was just thinking about like, I don't know, whenever absolutes are argued, and like I think you said like a couple of times throughout the episode, basically, like that it doesn't seem to be, it seems to be a very general philosophy as opposed to like anything that is relevant to implementation.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
Cool.
I think it's got relevant for the countries that aren't, already rich. I think there's a lot of these you can look at and say, why potentially, like, what's gone wrong here and what could we change? But for like the US, it's probably less applicable because it's kind of like, okay, yeah, at the US level, it's like the details that we would differ on. Yeah, it's what you'd care about.
Right.
It's I would say for the US, it still could be relevant. Just like don't do stuff that are the opposite of inclusive, right? Just like, and that's one way to prevent US from failing, I guess, right?
Sure, but I feel like, if it's talking about like the extortive practices it's referring to, and like the are almost like on a level that we're like, it's like on a level that we're not going back there, right? I mean, because like it's referring to like slavery, things like so. I mean, is there that much we need to learn? Like, if they're that extreme, is like
it's in policies right now. I mean, there's a lot of countries like Brazil, like other African country. They don't have slavery right now, right? But they still not doing very well, right? North Korea, no slavery, but
they have slavery in North Korea.
Yeah, still, I mean, there's a lot of countries. There's no slavery, no like exploitative, obvious policies, maybe, but they're still not doing. They're failing, right? Because like I guess Venezuela, right? Look at what's going on there, right? So chaos. I guess
nationalize a bunch of industries, cause an economic collapse. It's not very
but I guess that's what I'm saying, though. Like you're naming countries where literally people are just totally removed from the economic and or political process.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, the U.S. is not even like, the U.S. includes, I mean, despite what like a lot of people are arguing about now, a lot of people, a very high percentage of people are included in both the economic and political processes here.
Yeah, but I'm saying that it's just like in the future, you never know, right? So you need to prevent that, like going downhill in the future, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
If someone came in, and Napoleon came in and said, "Hey, to govern the country," say, "Oh, yeah, dictator or something," right? So yeah.
Right. Yes. If we suddenly slip into a dictatorship,
and some say we were really close. They went for the electoral college vote. This is not really that close, but there was a sort of a coup attempt.
And if our political, like, almost dictator is now giving speeches at like weddings, just trashing the new president, I mean, I don't know how close we were. But
wait, Trump's giving speeches at weddings? I didn't hear about that.
Well, no, there was like some wedding at Mar-a-Lago, and he like he showed up and like took the microphone, and apparently, like, I didn't watch the video, but apparently he was like going off on Biden and stuff. It's like, whatever.
That sounds kind of sad, but
yeah.
Have you heard he's starting a social network?
I did hear that.
Yeah.
Is it going to be like a Twitter copy, or?
I don't know. I mean,
since I don't because he loved Twitter, but
yeah, since I don't have Facebook, maybe I should join.
It would give you an insight to at least one section of the country for sure. It's a good way to not be too echo chambery, right? What
true.
This group of individuals believe that are clearly all mentally well. There's probably be a lot of QAnon.
If you retrain that AI speech model, like
for QAnon,
yeah. Right.
That could actually be really funny. And then post it anonymously on internet stuff, right? Ooh, this could be good.
Yeah. Actually, the GTP model, actually, they define. That's a reason why it's on a wait list, because a lot of people, they were finding out, and that's learning a lot of like bias, like racist stuff, right? So that's why they restrict the access to GTP. Actually, one of the reasons, and I think some people are saying that. Yeah.
It just makes me think of that Microsoft AI, was it Tay or whatever, the like chat bot.
Oh yeah.
That they put up like 6 years ago or something, but like they put it up and just let it chat with anyone and learn. And in like 24 hours, they had to shut it down because
Right.
it was quoting Hitler and spewing all sorts of hate and stuff. And it's like, oh man, like, of course that's going to happen because the internet's going to be like, yeah, let's corrupt this. But
Yeah, well, no. I mean, anonymous, like people when they're anonymous are just going to do terrible things to
just for fun.
have a laugh.
Yeah.
All right, let's
right.
put an end to this episode, and then we're tuning next time for Bruce Lee. I guess we talk about Bruce Lee next time.
Bruce Lee and martial arts and related philosophy.
The best are Tai Chi, of course, the best martial art in the world.
Yeah,
That's right.
We can talk about how Matt punched me in the face.
You weren't supposed to let me, but
No.
Yeah.
Or punch me in the arms when I had a turtle.
Oh yeah, just punched your hands right into your face because you weren't doing a good solid guard.
That's right.
Yes.
All right. So I'm gonna finish with how we sign off now. We are